The recorded map shows a clear obstruction of the drainage easement. We are issuing a formal notice of violation.
The morning my basement started flooding, I was standing barefoot in 6 inches of muddy water behind my house, staring at the brand new concrete patio my neighbor had built directly over the drainage easement. Rain was still coming down hard enough to blur the fence line. Water poured from the higher lots behind us, rushed toward the shallow drainage swale that had always carried it safely away, and then hit Carol Whitman's new patio like a wall. Instead of flowing through the easement and out to the county storm drain, it turned back toward my yard. It spread across my grass, swallowed my stone walkway, and pushed straight against the foundation of my house. Inside, my sump pump was screaming. The basement carpet was soaked. Brown water had already reached the bottom of the drywall, and I could smell that awful mix of wet insulation, mud, and panic. I had towels pressed against the basement door, a shop vacuum running, and buckets lined up like any of it could stop what was happening. Then Carol stepped out under the roof of her new patio, dry as could be, holding a coffee mug and watching the water destroy my yard. She did not look shocked. She did not even look sorry. She looked annoyed that I was standing there. A few minutes later, Richard Hale, the HOA president, appeared with a rain jacket, a clipboard, and the kind of calm expression that made my blood pressure spike. He did not ask if my house was damaged. He did not ask why the water had nowhere to go. He handed me a violation notice for improper drainage maintenance and told me I had 72 hours to correct the standing water on my property. That was when I looked from his notice to Carol's patio, then to the muddy water pushing against my foundation, and realized exactly what they had done. Carol had wanted that patio for months. The HOA had approved it. Together, they had treated a recorded drainage easement like an inconvenience they could bury under concrete. What they did not know was that a few weeks later, a county stormwater inspector would stand in that same yard and order the patio cut apart. Carol would be forced to pay for the damage. The HOA would be dragged into an emergency meeting, and Richard, who thought a board approval could erase county records, would have to explain why he helped flood my house. But before the county came out, before the violation notice went up on Carol's patio, I had to prove one simple thing: that water had not failed. They had blocked its only way out. I bought that house because it was the first place in my life that felt permanent. It was not the biggest home in the subdivision, and it definitely was not the newest. The kitchen still had old cabinet hinges, the garage door groaned every time it opened, and the basement needed more work than I wanted to admit. But it was mine. After years of renting, moving, saving, and fixing other people's problems during long shifts, I finally had a place where I could come home, close the door, and feel like the ground under my feet belonged to me. My name is Ethan Miller. At the time, I was 39 and working as a maintenance systems technician at a local hospital. That meant my days were usually spent around alarms, pumps, air handlers, emergency calls, and equipment that always seemed to fail at the worst possible moment. I understood water. I understood drainage. I understood that small problems ignored long enough eventually became expensive disasters. That was why, when I bought the house, I paid close attention to one thing most buyers probably would have skimmed past in the paperwork: the drainage easement. My lot sat slightly lower than the homes behind it. During heavy rain, water from several yards naturally moved downhill toward the back of my property before flowing through a shallow swale behind the fence line. From there, it ran through a recorded drainage easement and into the county stormwater system. It was not decorative. It was not optional. It was the reason my backyard did not turn into a pond every time a summer storm rolled through. The home inspector explained it clearly before I closed. He stood in the backyard, pointed toward the slight dip in the land, and told me that as long as the easement stayed open, the house should be fine. He warned me not to build over it, block it, plant heavy-rooted trees in it, or let anyone treat it like unused land, so I respected it. I kept that strip clear. I trimmed the grass, cleared leaves after storms, and never placed anything permanent where the water needed to move. That was not because I loved rules. It was because I understood what the easement protected. It protected my basement. It protected my foundation. It protected the money I had poured into that house, one repair at a time. I had replaced drywall myself, painted rooms after work, installed shelves in the garage, and spent weekends turning that damp basement into a small workshop where I could fix tools, restore old furniture, and breathe after a hard week. Carol Whitman never saw it that way. Carol lived behind me, on the slightly higher lot where the water came from before it reached the easement. She was the kind of neighbor who always spoke like she was making an announcement. Her lawn was perfect. Her porch furniture changed with every season. She loved hosting wine nights, posting pictures of her backyard online, and telling everyone that property value depended on people having standards. At first, I thought she was just proud of her home. Then she started talking about the strip of land near the drainage swale like it offended her personally. She called it ugly. She called it wasted space. She said the easement made the back of her yard look unfinished. More than once, she mentioned wanting a large concrete patio with a covered seating area, a fire table, and enough room for guests. Every time she brought it up, I reminded her that the drainage path had to stay open. I was polite about it. I never told her what to do with her yard. I only said the same thing over and over. Just do not block the easement. She would smile and say I worried too much. The HOA president, Richard Hale, was even worse. He treated every rule like a weapon when it helped him, and like a suggestion when it helped his friends. If my trash bin stayed outside too long, I got an email. If someone had the wrong shade of mulch, they got a warning. But when Carol wanted something, Richard called it an improvement. He liked her because she praised the board, volunteered for committees, and made him feel important. I stayed out of HOA politics as much as I could. I did not want enemies. I did not want drama. I just wanted the easement left alone so my home would stay dry. And if you have ever lived near someone who thinks a recorded property right is just an inconvenience, leave your thoughts in the comments, because people like that do not usually start by breaking the rules in public. They start by convincing themselves the rules should not apply to them. When Carol first mentioned that Richard had looked at her patio plans, I asked one question: had anyone checked the county drainage records? She laughed and told me the HOA had it handled. That was the moment I should have known trouble was coming, because the people who say they have everything handled are often the same people who have not read the one document that actually matters. The construction started on a Monday morning, which made it feel planned in the worst possible way. Carol did not wait for a weekend when more neighbors would be outside asking questions. She chose a workday, right after sunrise, when most people were leaving for jobs, and the street was too busy to notice what was happening behind our houses. I was making coffee before my shift when I heard the first truck backing up behind her lot, followed by the grinding sound of equipment scraping soil. At first, I thought she was having landscaping done. Then I looked out the back window and saw workers cutting into the shallow swale that carried stormwater away from my yard. They were not trimming grass or setting patio furniture. They were flattening the ground, scraping away the low channel, and spreading gravel directly over the drainage path. I went outside immediately. Carol was standing near the work area in a clean jacket and rubber boots that had clearly never touched real mud. She looked pleased, almost relieved, like months of waiting had finally turned into concrete and noise. Behind her, a contractor was marking the outline of a large patio with stakes and string. The shape stretched across the exact section I had warned her about more than once. I reminded her that the area was a recorded drainage easement. I told her that water from the upper lots needed that channel to stay open. I explained that if she raised that surface, the water would have nowhere to go except backward toward my property. She barely reacted. She said the HOA had approved the patio, the design had been reviewed, and the work was happening on her land. That was the phrase she kept using, as if ownership of the surface erased the easement beneath it. Less than 30 minutes later, Richard Hale arrived. He walked into Carol's backyard with a folder under his arm, and the same calm, superior expression he wore at HOA meetings. He did not inspect the drainage swale. He did not ask the contractor about grading. He did not look at the county plat, or ask whether anyone had filed for stormwater review. He simply told me the architectural committee had approved Carol's improvement, and that I needed to stop interfering. I asked whether the county had approved it. Richard said HOA review was sufficient for exterior improvements. I asked whether the contractor had checked the recorded easement. He said the board had determined there would be no significant community impact. I asked whether he understood that a drainage easement was not an HOA decoration, and his face tightened just enough to tell me he did not like being questioned in front of Carol. Then he warned me that if I continued disrupting an approved project, the HOA could issue a violation for harassment of contractors and obstruction of community-approved work. That was how the whole thing worked. Carol wanted something, Richard wanted to look powerful, the contractor wanted to get paid, and I was expected to stand there while they buried the only drainage path protecting my house. By noon, the gravel base had covered most of the swale. By the next morning, rebar was in place. The contractor added a raised retaining edge along the back side of the patio, the exact kind of lip that would stop water instead of letting it pass. I took photos from my side of the fence, careful not to step onto Carol's property. A worker noticed and shook his head like I was the problem. By the end of the week, the patio was finished. It was large, smooth, and expensive looking, with a covered seating frame on one side and built-in steps leading down to the yard. Carol posted pictures in the neighborhood group, calling it a beautiful upgrade to an underused space. Several people complimented it. Richard commented that responsible improvements helped maintain property values. I stared at the photos and felt sick because I could see exactly what they had done. The slight dip in the land was gone. The water path was gone. The easement still existed on paper, but in real life it had been sealed beneath concrete. The first big storm came 11 days later. It started in the middle of the night, heavy and steady. The kind of rain that usually filled the swale fast but drained away just as quickly. I woke up around 4 in the morning to the sound of my sump pump running nonstop. At first, I thought it was normal. Then the alarm on the backup sensor started beeping from the basement. When I opened the back door, cold, muddy water was already spreading across the patio steps on my side. It rushed down from the higher lots, hit Carol's new concrete barrier, and curled back toward my yard in a wide, angry sheet. The old drainage path had acted like a shallow river. Now Carol's patio acted like a dam. Within an hour, water was pressing against my foundation. By sunrise, it had pushed through the basement threshold. I ran towels along the wall, dragged boxes onto shelves, and used a shop vacuum until my arms shook. The carpet was soaked. The lower drywall had darkened. A storage cabinet near the wall had started to swell. My small workshop, the one place I had built for myself after years of fixing other people's emergencies, smelled like dirty rainwater and wet wood. I called Carol as soon as it was light. She did not answer. I sent photos. She replied later, claiming the patio had nothing to do with my drainage problem and that I should maintain my own yard better. An hour after that, an email from the HOA arrived. Richard had issued me a notice for improper drainage maintenance, standing water, and failure to prevent runoff issues affecting neighboring properties. I read it twice because I could not believe the nerve of it. They had approved the obstruction. They had ignored the easement. They had watched concrete cover the swale. And now, while I was pulling soaked carpet away from my basement wall, they were blaming me for the water they had trapped. That was the moment I stopped thinking of it as a disagreement. It was a setup. Carol got her patio, Richard protected his favorite homeowner, and the HOA tried to shift the consequences onto me before anyone could ask why the drainage system had suddenly failed. I stood in the basement with muddy water around my shoes, holding that violation notice on my phone, and felt the anger rise so sharply I had to put the phone down. I wanted to march over there. I wanted to pound on Carol's door and make Richard stand in the water he had helped create. But water leaves evidence. Concrete leaves evidence. County records leave evidence. So instead of giving them the outburst they were probably hoping for, I picked up my camera, started filming the flow of water against Carol's patio, and began documenting the exact path their mistake had taken into my home. I started filming before the rain even stopped. I stood at the back door with water running over my shoes and recorded the entire path it was taking. The video showed the runoff coming from the higher lots, reaching the place where the old swale used to carry it away, and then slamming into Carol's new patio. It spread sideways, curled around the raised concrete edge, and pushed straight into my yard. I moved slowly, narrating the date, the time, the direction of the flow, and the fact that this was the first major storm since the patio had been poured. Then I went downstairs and filmed the basement. I did not want to. Part of me wanted to clean first, to hide the damage, to make the place look less embarrassing. But I knew that if this became a fight, clean floors would not prove anything. So I recorded the soaked carpet, the brown water line on the drywall, the swollen cabinet, the puddle around the base of my workbench, and the sump pump alarm still blinking red. I took close-up photos of everything, then wide shots showing the whole room. I took pictures of the water pressing against the foundation outside and the muddy trail where it had entered. By noon, I had started a folder on my computer with separate sections for photos, videos, HOA emails, repair estimates, weather reports, and property documents. I saved the HOA violation notice as a PDF. I took screenshots of Carol's text messages claiming the patio had nothing to do with my flooding. I downloaded the neighborhood group post where she had bragged about turning an ugly drainage area into a usable entertainment space. Then I saved Richard's comment praising the project as an example of responsible improvement. Those words would matter later. After the immediate water was under control, I pulled out my closing documents. I found my deed, the title paperwork, the home inspection report, and the survey from when I bought the property. The drainage easement was right there, drawn across the back of the lots in a clean line that matched the old swale exactly. It was not vague, it was not hidden, it was not some forgotten verbal agreement between neighbors. It was recorded, mapped, and tied to the stormwater system for the subdivision. The inspection report made it even clearer. The inspector had written that the home depended on the rear drainage easement remaining unobstructed. He had specifically noted that any grading change or permanent structure in that area could redirect water toward the foundation. I read that sentence 3 times, because it described exactly what Carol's patio had done. Then I checked the county GIS map. The easement appeared there too, marked across several parcels, including Carol's. I printed the map and highlighted the section her patio covered. I searched county stormwater records and found the original subdivision drainage plan. It showed water from the higher lots flowing through that corridor before entering the county drain. The swale behind our homes was not an accident of landscaping. It was part of the designed drainage route. Next, I searched the permit database. There was no permit for a concrete patio at Carol's address. No grading permit, no stormwater review, no drainage modification request, no inspection record, nothing. The HOA had approved a project that changed the flow of water without any sign that the county had reviewed it. That was when the anger in me settled into focus. Carol and Richard had treated the easement like my personal complaint, but the county records showed it was part of a larger system. I called my homeowner's insurance company and opened a claim. When the adjuster came out, I showed him the basement first, then walked him to the backyard. He looked at the watermarks, the grade, the patio edge, and the direction of the runoff. He asked one simple question: what changed recently? I pointed to Carol's concrete patio. He took his own photos and told me to keep every receipt, every email, and every document related to the patio approval. That same afternoon, I hired a drainage engineer for an independent assessment. He arrived with a laser level, a measuring rod, and the kind of expression that told me he had seen neighbor disputes turn into engineering problems before. He measured the old slope, checked the elevation difference between the higher yards and mine, and stood beside Carol's patio for a long moment without saying anything. Then he said the raised edge was acting like a barrier. Water that used to move through the easement was being redirected toward my foundation. I asked him to put it in writing. While I waited for his report, I emailed the HOA. I kept the message polite and specific. I asked for the architectural approval file, the site plan Carol submitted, any drainage review, any county permit number, any board discussion of the recorded easement, and the rule Richard relied on when he decided I was responsible for water that could no longer reach the drainage path. I also asked them to preserve all communications with Carol and the contractor. Their answer came the next morning. They said the patio was a private improvement approved by the board, that drainage on my lot was my responsibility, and that continued accusations against another homeowner could be considered harassment. They did not provide a permit. They did not provide a stormwater review. They did not mention the recorded easement at all. So I printed that email too. By the end of the week, I had a timeline that was hard to ignore. Carol complained about the easement. Richard approved her patio. Contractors buried the swale under concrete. The first major rain sent water into my basement. The HOA blamed me before anyone checked the county records, and every document I found pointed back to the same fact. The easement had not failed because of neglect. It had failed because someone blocked it. When the drainage engineer's report arrived, the final paragraph said the patio appeared to obstruct the recorded drainage easement and redirect stormwater toward my property. He recommended immediate review by county stormwater officials. That was the line I needed. I put the deed, survey, GIS map, stormwater plan, engineer report, insurance photos, HOA notices, Carol's messages, and my videos into one packet. Then I sent a copy to a real estate attorney and another to the county stormwater office. I did not need to shout at Carol. I did not need to argue with Richard. I just needed the people who understood drainage law to look at the concrete wall they had helped build. The county stormwater office was not impressed by HOA language. That was the first thing I noticed. When I sat down across from the stormwater technician and explained that Richard had called Carol's patio an approved exterior improvement, she did not even blink. She just opened the county map, typed in the parcel numbers, and pulled up the subdivision drainage plan like she had seen this exact kind of mistake too many times before. The easement was there in black and white. It crossed the back of several lots, including Carol's, then continued toward the county storm drain at the far end of the block. It was not a decorative swale. It was not a landscaping choice. It was not HOA common space. It was a recorded drainage easement tied to the stormwater design for the entire section of the neighborhood. The technician zoomed in, turned her monitor toward me, and pointed to the line Carol had buried under concrete. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. No private structure should be obstructing that without county review and approval. I felt the pressure in my chest loosen for the first time in days. Not because the damage was gone. My basement still smelled like wet drywall, and my workshop was still torn apart. But finally, someone outside the HOA was looking at the same records I had been looking at and seeing the obvious. The technician checked for permits under Carol's address. Nothing came up. She checked for a grading permit. Nothing. She checked for a stormwater review, drainage modification request, variance, site plan, or inspection note. Nothing. According to the county, Carol's patio had never been submitted for review, even though it changed grade, covered a drainage swale, and sat directly over an easement that served multiple properties. That was the first legal turn. The second came when I showed her the HOA approval email. Richard had written that the board had reviewed the project and found no drainage impact. The technician read that line twice, then asked if the HOA had provided any engineering report or county clearance. I told her they had not. I showed her their follow-up email accusing me of harassment and saying drainage on my lot was my responsibility. She shook her head and made a note in the file. An HOA could enforce community appearance rules. It could approve patio materials, color, fencing, and design under its own bylaws. But it could not erase a recorded easement. It could not authorize a homeowner to block a stormwater path. It could not decide, on its own, that county drainage infrastructure no longer mattered because one homeowner wanted a nicer, entertaining area. Then I showed her the video. The first clip was from the storm itself, water rushing down from the higher lots and slamming into Carol's patio before turning toward my foundation. The second showed the contractor leveling the swale before the pour. The third was from the day before construction, when Carol and Richard stood near the drainage area with the contractor, pointing at the ground. It did not prove every thought in their heads, but it proved they knew exactly where the low channel was before it disappeared under concrete. The stormwater technician called in a supervisor. He reviewed the engineer's report, the recorded plat, my survey, and the photos of my basement. Then he explained that drainage easements exist because water does not respect fences, preferences, or HOA politics. If one property owner blocks the designed path, the water simply moves somewhere else. In this case, it had moved into my yard and against my foundation. He told me to file a formal complaint and attach every document. I had already organized the packet, so all I had to do was hand it over. The county opened a stormwater obstruction case that same afternoon. They also referred the patio to code enforcement because of the missing permit and possible grading violation. My attorney sent demand letters the next day to Carol, Richard, the HOA board, and the contractor. The letter was precise and calm, which somehow made it feel more powerful. It demanded that Carol stop using the patio area in a way that worsened drainage, preserve all records, and cooperate with the county investigation. It demanded that the HOA preserve every email, meeting note, architectural review document, and message related to Carol's patio. It warned that continued attempts to fine me for the standing water could be used as evidence that the HOA was shifting blame after approving the obstruction. Carol's response was exactly what I expected. She wrote a long message saying I was jealous, dramatic, and trying to punish her for improving her home. She claimed the patio had increased property values and that one storm did not prove anything. Richard followed with another notice, accusing me of abusing county resources and creating conflict in the community. This time, I did not argue. I forwarded everything to my attorney, my insurance adjuster, and the county case file. Every insult helped. Every threat helped. Every time Richard repeated that the HOA had authority, he made it clearer that he had approved something he did not have the power to approve. By Friday, the legal picture was painfully simple. The easement was recorded. The patio was fixed concrete. The swale had been filled. The county had never approved the change. The HOA approval did not matter. The water damage began after the obstruction, and Carol's own public post bragged that she had turned the ugly drainage area into usable space. For weeks, Carol and Richard had acted like confidence was proof. But county records did not care how confidently someone lied. The easement had existed before Carol bought her house, before Richard became HOA president, and before a single yard of concrete was poured. On Monday morning, I saw a white county truck slow down in front of Carol's house. A stormwater inspector stepped out, followed by a code enforcement officer with a tablet in his hand. Carol opened her front door, already shaking her head like she was preparing to argue. But the county was not there to debate her patio design. They were there to inspect the obstruction. The county trucks changed everything before anyone said a word. For weeks, Carol had acted like her patio was untouchable because Richard and the HOA had approved it. But when the stormwater inspector stepped out with a tablet and the code enforcement officer followed him toward the back of the properties, the whole situation stopped feeling like a neighborhood argument. It became an official investigation. Carol came outside almost immediately, moving fast across her driveway with her phone in her hand and anger all over her face. Richard arrived a few minutes later, wearing a jacket with the HOA logo on it like it was some kind of badge. He tried to stand between the inspectors and the patio, explaining that the board had already reviewed the project and that this was a private dispute between homeowners. But the stormwater inspector did not treat him like an authority. He asked for the permit number, the stormwater approval, and the grading plan. Richard had none of them. Carol tried to say the contractor had handled everything. The contractor, who had been called out to meet the county, said he had relied on Carol's HOA approval and the site sketch she provided. That was the first time I saw Carol's confidence crack. Everyone had been comfortable blaming me when it was just emails and violation notices. Now there were county officials standing in the yard, asking for documents nobody could produce. The inspector walked the drainage path from the upper lots down toward my property. He studied the county plat on his tablet, then looked at the concrete patio covering the swale. The code enforcement officer took photographs of the raised patio edge, the filled-in channel, the standing watermarks on my side of the fence, and the slope leading toward my foundation. Then they used measuring equipment to compare the old grade shown on the drainage plan with the new elevation created by Carol's concrete slab. The result was obvious. The patio had created a barrier across the recorded drainage easement. Water that should have moved through the swale was being forced sideways and backward toward my yard. The inspector pointed out that the easement served more than one property, which meant Carol had not just changed the drainage for herself, she had interfered with part of the subdivision's stormwater system. That was when the violation notice went up. It was placed near the edge of the patio, bright and impossible to miss. The county listed obstruction of a recorded drainage easement, unpermitted grading work, and construction without required stormwater review. Carol stood there with her arms crossed, saying almost nothing now. Richard tried once more to bring up HOA approval, but the inspector made it clear that HOA approval did not replace county permits, did not override recorded easements, and did not give a homeowner permission to redirect stormwater onto someone else's property. For the first time, nobody was asking me to prove I was not the problem. The county was proving it for me. The investigation did not stop in Carol's backyard. The inspector reviewed my basement photos, the water line on the drywall, the sump pump failure, the engineer's report, and the video showing runoff hitting the patio and turning toward my foundation. He also took a copy of the HOA notice accusing me of improper drainage maintenance. When he read it, his expression changed just enough for me to know he understood exactly what had happened. The HOA had approved the obstruction, then tried to fine the person whose house flooded because of it. 3 nights later, the HOA held an emergency meeting, and the room was packed. People who usually ignored board business showed up because they realized this was not just about my basement. If the HOA could approve a project over a recorded easement on Carol's lot, it could make the same mistake anywhere in the neighborhood. I did not yell. I did not insult Carol. I placed the documents in order: the deed, the survey, the county drainage map, the patio photos, the flood video, the engineer's report, the permit search, the county violation, and Richard's emails. The silence in that room felt heavier than any argument. Richard tried to say the board had acted in good faith, but one of the board members asked why nobody had checked the county plat before approving concrete over a marked drainage easement. Another resident asked why I had been fined for standing water when the county now said the water had been blocked by a project the HOA approved. Carol tried to describe the flood as an overreaction, but by then everyone had seen the photos of my basement and the video of water turning off her patio like it had hit a dam. The power shifted right there. Richard was no longer the man enforcing rules from the front table. He was the man explaining why the rules had been ignored for someone he favored. Carol was no longer the homeowner with the beautiful new patio. She was the person whose concrete slab had triggered a county violation and flooded a neighbor's house. By the end of the meeting, the board agreed to pause all fines against me, consult legal counsel, and cooperate with the county. Carol was given a deadline to submit a correction plan. The contractor was told not to touch the site again without county approval. And I walked out with the first real sense that this was no longer a fight I had to carry alone. The county had put the truth in writing. Now all that remained was finding out how expensive that truth would be for the people who tried to bury it under concrete. The final county order gave Carol two options, and neither one let her keep the patio the way it was. She could submit an engineered drainage correction plan that restored the easement's full function, or she could remove the portion of concrete blocking the swale and return the grade to the approved stormwater design. After two contractors and one engineer looked at it, the answer was the same every time. The patio had been poured in the wrong place. There was no clean fix that did not involve cutting it apart. The demolition started on a cold Thursday morning. I watched from my kitchen window as saws cut through the concrete Carol had bragged about only weeks earlier. The same raised edge that had turned stormwater toward my foundation was broken into chunks, loaded into wheelbarrows, and hauled away. The contractor had to reopen the drainage path, reshape the swale, and bring in clean soil to restore the proper slope. County inspectors came back twice before approving the correction. They checked the grade, the flow path, and the section of easement Carol had tried to turn into entertainment space. Carol had to pay for the removal, the regrading, the inspection fees, and the new drainage work. Her contractor was cited for unpermitted grading and construction that affected a recorded drainage easement without county review. Their insurance company got involved after my homeowner's insurance pursued recovery for the damage in my basement. Between the soaked carpet, damaged drywall, ruined storage cabinets, sump pump replacement, cleanup costs, and my deductible, the numbers added up fast. The HOA did not escape either. Every violation notice against me was withdrawn in writing. The board had to send a letter to the neighborhood explaining that HOA approval did not override recorded easements, county drainage plans, permit requirements, or private property rights. They also had to change the architectural review process. From that point on, any project near a drainage easement, utility easement, property line, swale, or stormwater feature required county clearance before the HOA could even consider approving it. Richard Hale stepped down less than a month later. Officially, he said he wanted to spend more time with his family. Unofficially, everyone knew the meeting had ended his authority. Too many residents had seen the emails. Too many had watched him fine me for water his approval helped trap in my yard. Once people realized his version of leadership could expose their homes and their dues to legal risk, the confidence he had built his reputation on disappeared. Carol never gave me a real apology. She sent one short message through the HOA, saying she regretted the situation had become stressful for everyone. That was as close as she ever came. But she paid what the settlement required. She signed an agreement acknowledging the recorded drainage easement, promising not to obstruct it again, and agreeing that any future work near that area needed county approval first. The next heavy rain came about 6 weeks after the swale was restored. I stood at the back window and watched the water move the way it was always supposed to move. It ran down from the higher lots, entered the easement, passed behind the fence line, and continued toward the county drain. It did not pool against my foundation. It did not push through my basement door. It just flowed. That was the most satisfying part of the whole thing. Not seeing Carol's patio cut apart. Not watching Richard lose his position. Not even getting the fines erased. It was seeing the water follow the path that had been recorded all along. The path everyone should have respected before a single yard of concrete was poured. I did not win because I yelled louder. I did not win because I threatened anyone or tried to get revenge in the dark. I won because I documented the damage, checked the deed, found the easement, saved the emails, hired the right expert, and let the county records speak louder than the HOA president. A drainage easement is not a suggestion. A permit is not optional just because an HOA board likes your patio. And water, like the truth, will always find the path people tried to block. So if you are dealing with a neighbor or an HOA that thinks approval from a board is stronger than recorded property rights, do not let them rush you into silence. Take pictures, save every message, check your county records, get the survey, ask the permit office the question nobody wants you to ask. And if this story reminded you of something happening in your own neighborhood, leave your thoughts in the comments, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories where patience, proof, and the law finally put people back where they belong.